Hello. I'm doing my bit right out in front of the episode this month, because this is not just the final episode of Season 4, it will also be the last regular monthly episode of the podcast, at least for a while. As I mentioned at the end of the last season, my stockpile of stories is finite, and Season 4 featured the last of my already published stories, along with all the stories I've managed to complete over the past 18 months. So I will be putting the show into an indefinite hiatus after this episode. Hopefully not forever. But after putting episodes out every month for 4 years, and working on the new Ghost Stories project for well over a decade now, it also feels like a good time to take a bit of a rest, and to take stock of things and consider how to move things forward. When I started the podcast, we were still in the midst of the pandemic. I didn't know how long I was going to do it for, or whether anyone would listen. It was a strange and uncertain time then, and it continues to be a strange and uncertain time now. I want to thank you for joining me on this journey through these dark shadows of modern life, where the ghosts may or may not exist, but the despair is real, and all the pain, sorrow, anxiety, and loneliness that go with it. I suppose that's another reason to take a break. There's so much darkness in the world. It's important to take a step back, to enjoy life while I have a life to live. We're only guaranteed one go-round. We have to make the most of it. There are indeed many things out there to be afraid of. But nothing wastes our time, quite like fear. I want to thank you for listening to the show. I want to thank everyone out there who's left a review, left a comment on Spotify or somewhere else, reached out on social media, recommended the show to a friend. I am enormously grateful that you have granted me some of your precious time and been so supportive. And hopefully this is not the end. I know that there are more stories out there to tell, more things to learn about the curious world we live in this uncertain time. So stay subscribed if you are subscribed. Follow the @New Ghost Stories social feeds on Threads, Instagram, Mastodon, Blue Sky, and whatever he's calling Twitter now. Or sign up to the Substack at newghoststories.substack.com if you'd like to know what's going on and when new stories might be coming. It might even be sooner than you think. Maybe even, say, Christmas, perhaps. I don't know, we'll have to see. From the bottom of my heart, I thank you once again. And now, to part 2 of A Rhythm of 8. Here we go. Once again. The story you're about to hear was told to me in the strictest of confidence. Certain names, dates and locations have been changed to protect that confidence. Events that feature in this story may be part of the public record. If you believe you recognise any of the people, places or events that appear in this story, I ask you not to reveal any information publicly, out of respect for the subject's right to remain anonymous. My name is David Paul Nixon, and this is the New Ghost Stories podcast, where we delve into the New Ghost Stories archive to hear new and classic cases of the supernatural. Stories that could be delusions, lies, fantasies, or perhaps even the real thing. Just don't make your mind up until you've listened. He awoke to the sound of stomping feet. There were many voices, objects being moved, things being struck, ripped, broken. He was once again without substance, an awareness without a presence. It took time to regain the senses he had lost. The noise was almost too much to bear. One thing he could be certain of, this was no family. There were too many different tones and textures, and the noise they made was louder and more intense until it ceased. The activity was broken by long, interminable silences. He would in time untangle all the noises, all the activity, all the sometimes ceaseless, sometimes ceasing activity. The house was full of workmen. Builders were stripping down the house and redesigning it. He had solved one puzzle, but now he had a more trying problem. The workmen worked slowly and at their own pace. There was little animosity between them. They rarely rose to anger, unless met with unexpected challenges. Serious incidents were few and far between. The only source of occasional discomfort came from their conversations with the man who he discerned was paying them. In time, the cruel man would come to understand that this man was the new owner of the property. He was frustrated with the slow progress and the growing expenses, and that gave the cruel man something to feed off. It wasn't much, but he at least gained strength faster than before. But it wasn't fast enough. He was impatient. He would need to create tension and terror himself if he was ever to grow in substance again. Fortunately, a building site is a natural place for accidents. He was too weak at first to create much impact. He had to make do with causing minor annoyances, making small screws go missing, pushing a useful tool out of reach, getting dust and dirt onto painted surfaces. These inconveniences, when enacted in close succession, strengthened him bit by bit. He was preserving his energy for greater opportunities. He struck gold one afternoon when a man was using a ladder that was too small, and he was stretching up to a light fitting just above some stairs. The cruel man wasn't that strong, but all it took was a little push. It was almost too much to take in at once. After feeding on morsels for so long, this heavy portion left him in a daze, but it was the boost he needed. From then on, he never left them at peace. Paint pots would be turned over, attachments on power tools would suddenly shake loose, planks with nails sticking out of them would suddenly appear in places where the men walked. Cutting tables would suddenly collapse, sending sawdust and splinters everywhere. The workmen became spooked. Some were hurt badly. Gradually their numbers dwindled. Yet his most devastating stroke took almost no exertion at all. They were working on the wiring. All he had to do was flick a switch for the power to come back on. A man was nearly killed, and that was the last straw for those still working there. The house was empty again. He began to panic. He'd enjoyed himself too much. He was losing the strength he'd only just got back. He would lose himself again. But the owner would bring in new people, and he lied to them. He'd say he'd sacked the previous crew, and to the cruel man's relief, these new builders got to work quickly. The owner was increasingly anxious. This was taking too long and costing him too much. This new crew was suspicious. Perhaps they'd heard rumours of the mishaps and accidents. Perhaps he just seemed like a fussy client. It took the cruel man just 2 days to scare them out. He was enjoying himself, getting greedy. It was a risk, but he guessed the owner wouldn't give up easily, not after investing so much. He wavered a little in his convictions. The house was empty for a long time before the owner returned once more. He arrived with an old man and a woman. They guided the old man towards the circuit box and let him do his work. The owner and the woman, it had to be his wife, moved to another room where they began to argue. They couldn't afford to invest more money. Couldn't they just get rid of it, take their losses and go? No, he wouldn't give up. They were separating the upstairs and downstairs to create 2 flats. He didn't know why there'd been so many accidents and issues, but it was almost done. In this market they could still make money selling both, at least break even. Other than the electric, they could do almost everything else themselves. Stay over there on weekends until it was done. No, there was nothing weird about the place. Just a bunch of idiots who messed up and spread stories to spite him. They could work weekends, it would be done in a few months, and then they could get a quick sale. She wasn't convinced, but she capitulated. The fun and games with the builders had been entertaining, nourishing, but it wasn't as satisfying as focusing on individuals and slowly turning the screw, building and exaggerating their torment so he could overwhelm them and take control. He played one off against the other. She was more easily terrified, so he played games with her, hid her handbag, swapped her screwdriver for a spanner, then scattered the screws. He threw her hair clips in the bin, knocked on the front door so she'd come running, knocked on the wall so she'd go searching for him. The owner was still in denial. Distrust grew between them, then animosity. Why wouldn't he believe her? Why was she telling him all these crazy things? Why was he doing this to her? Why was she doing this to him? The cruel man didn't leave the owner entirely alone. His work on him was more subtle, disturbing his sleep with his ever-reliable rhythm so that he never slept well and awoke drowsy and bad-tempered, the rhythm slowly ticking away in his head. The final straw was when she reached for her coffee. The cruel man grabbed it, moving it from her reach. He slid it across the mantelpiece, sent it crashing against the wall. She exploded into hysteria. "I saw it move, but you're imagining things. Why don't you believe me?" It had taken time, but the cruel man had almost returned to the peak of his powers. But he was changing in ways he didn't understand. When the row was over, but unresolved, she was alone, crying. She wiped away her tears and walked from the upstairs bathroom to the kitchen, and she screamed in terror. She ran from the kitchen and out of the house, with her husband charging after her. But the cruel man had done nothing. He didn't understand what could have caused her to take flight. And then, as he moved, he saw the light shift on the glass of a new cooker top. It was a reflection. She had seen him. He was becoming real again. Suddenly everything seemed possible. Could he really become whole? When the owner returned, the cruel man decided he must not leave, so he stole his keys. The man wouldn't dare leave the house unlocked. He spent fruitless hours on the search, tried to call his wife. He'd have to stay there again until he found them. The other keys were at home. Would she bring them back? He left messages but got no answer. He tried to sleep, but the cruel man kept him awake with his knocking. The lights started to flip on and off. As soon as the owner had turned them off in one room, the cruel man would flip them on in another. He'd hear the knocking upstairs when he was downstairs, and then downstairs when he was upstairs. Doors slammed shut. He panicked, tried to leave, but the front door was somehow now locked, and the back door too. The cruel man created a racket upstairs. The owner had to go up and see. The cruel man struck him down the stairs, causing him to fall to the bottom. The cruel man was overjoyed at the sound of his own feet as he walked down the steps. The owner struggled to stand. When he saw the cruel man over him, he cried for his life. It was almost as good as being alive again. He felt the man's heartbeat race with his own hand, and then felt it slow at his command. He put his cheek next to his and listened to the owner's final breaths escape from his lips. Yes, he knew he had extinguished all his prey once again, and that he would slip back into that nowhere of slumber once more. But he knew he would rise again, even faster than before. These houses would be finished. They would get new occupants. He would come back, faster and stronger than ever before.
What is fucking wrong with this guy? I called and I texted, and eventually he answers and he's like, "Well, you look so good, babe. If you want to come over and give me another pretty picture to look at, maybe I don't need this one anymore." I had to scream at him for another 10 minutes before he finally got the message. I sat refreshing the Facebook page over and over until it was gone. It took about 20 minutes. It felt like forever. I don't feel any relief at all. It was out there. People knew. People would talk. If Kathy knew. She's hardly a social media pro. There's no reason it couldn't be discovered by the faculty. Christ. They didn't even need social media. They just had to overhear the students gossiping. I bury my head in my pillows. My heart is thumping. Perhaps it will give out. Then I'll be dead too. He's not fresh out of school. He's 21, I think. Why can't we just treat this like adults? He's an adult. With his Star Wars posters and his skateboard. What if this is it? What if they do kick me off the course? What was I going to do with the rest of my life? What was I going to tell Mum? Another night and no sleep. And the sound of knocking. Where's it coming from? It's not coming from the door. Maybe the crazy lady upstairs isn't so crazy after all. Better be nice to her. I might need my career in hospitality. I roll out of bed in the morning and wash and make myself presentable. It's Saturday, and it's my turn to be in charge. I still have my responsibilities. They don't change just because I've blown my life up. Fuck you, Claire Parker. Why couldn't you die somewhere else? There's just one, albeit difficult, guest to cope with. I can cope with that. Even I can't screw this up. I leave my room and notice a bad smell in the air. It's the smell of gas. One of the hobs hasn't been turned off properly in the kitchen. I switch it off and quickly open up the windows. How long has that been on? I look around. I can't see any signs he's been up and about. His bedroom door is closed, and it looks like his coat and boots are still there. Could it really have been on all night? We're lucky no harm's been done. It's so weirdly careless of him. It's mildly concerning, considering, what he's done before. But it was just one hob. As suicide attempts go, it's barely half-hearted. Probably just a mistake. Nothing to get worked up about. I set up a fan in the dining room. Hopefully I can move the air before our guest comes downstairs. I'll have to turn the heating up to replace the cold air. I can imagine her complaining already. But she doesn't come down. I got all the food ready. I got the place warm again. And she never even came down. I end up eating her breakfast, except for the gluten-free croissants. I chuck those. Great start to the day. God, my head hurts. I have this persistent ache. I have to take something for it. What am I going to do? If I'm found out, I'll just have to try and talk my way out of it. Will it count in my favour if I just fess up? No, that'll be stupid. I might get away with it. The staff might not find out. And I can always deny it. There's no evidence beyond the damn picture. Surely he wouldn't show anybody else, would he? Maybe I could claim it was fake. I wonder what H would do. He'd make some devilishly witty remark, stick his nose up at the lot of them and walk away, and then fall into something that just so happened to be even better, always landing on his feet. He might have been illegally gay, but he was a rich Cambridge man, so that trumped everything else. He had built in buffers for his life already. They never talk about that when they talk about great men, do they? How it was generally harder for them to fail in the first place. I can still hear knocking. Where's it coming from? And where is he? I decide to knock on his door. There's no answer. I pick up my phone, intending to text him, but then I see his mobile. It's on the coffee table in the living room. It's a grey and miserable day. He's not in the garden or the greenhouse. Might he have gone upstairs for something? Was he doing his communion thing again? I really, really hope not. My phone vibrates. God, it's Mum. I'm supposed to call her this weekend, aren't I? I don't need this. How am I supposed to make sense of anything if I can't even get a moment to myself to think? The reception bell rings. What is it now? Our one guest, of course. She keeps ringing the bell as I make my way to her. She looks furious. Yesterday I asked about the noise and nothing has been done. I'm not sure what noise you're talking about, I say. I know there's a knocking, but it's not loud and I don't know what it is, and I don't like her tone. Then there's the footsteps, she says. People coming and going from room to room. There's no one staying at this hotel except you. I feel my fists clench. Don't lie to me, my girl. I'm not lying to you, and I'm not your girl. Can't take this. I'm not going to take this. Don't snap at me. I've half a mind. That's hard to believe. I beg your pardon. It is what it is. If you're not happy with your stay here, you're welcome to go somewhere else. We won't charge you for any more nights. We would be happy for you to leave. She wasn't expecting that. Making herself as tall as she can, she says, Well, I'll do that then. I will go somewhere else. Please do. I've never known anything like it, she mutters, heading back to the stairs. I'm shaking. I wait at reception, amending her booking on the system and getting ready to take her keys and fend off any parting shots. We say nothing to each other as she drops them on the counter and heads for the door. I'm so tense. I can't even loosen up a little until she's through the door and gone for good. Why had I let myself get so angry? She's just a difficult customer. I'm paid to handle those. I shouldn't be bringing my feelings to work. We only had one guest, and I've blown it. Absolutely blown it. Now I'll have to find him. I'll need to apologise. We can't afford to be driving away customers. I've got to make my confession, fess up. I'm going to have to do so much of that soon. I'd better get started. I knock on his bedroom door again. Push it open to be doubly sure he's not there. Could he be prattling around upstairs? Why would he be running from room to room? What she said didn't make sense. But I'll have to check and make sure. As I reach for the master key, I hear a thump from downstairs. He's in the basement, probably doing the laundry. Why didn't I think of that before? The stairs are next to the reception desk. It's a single flight down. The room has a jumbo washing machine and matching dryer, and places for ironing and folding sheets. Doesn't get used much this time of year, but when I get down there, the place is a tip. Piles of boxes have appeared. There are sacks of clothes piled up, suitcases stuffed with books. There are odd bits of furniture and bric-a-brac, and paintings. There are framed canvases, stacked canvases, some finished, some barely started, piles of sketch pads and notebooks. There had been a locked door in the laundry. I'd never paid attention to it. I just thought it was something to do with the boiler. It never occurred to me there was anything worth seeing inside. That room was another bedroom, hidden underneath the hotel. It can't have been used for some time. Even in the dim light, I can see dust hanging in the air and thick coats of it on the furniture. The room has long been given over to storage, but it had been lived in once. This is where he kept all her things, where he'd shut them away after she died. When he talks about her, it's only ever a reference here and there. He uses words like free spirit and hippie. But looking at her things, I don't get a sense of someone who lived in the past. What I can see, taking into consideration her stylistic and artistic choices, is a dialogue between things old and new. A retro lava lamp stands next to a candelabra, and an old fold-down desk and drawer set, itself next to a modern dressing table in bamboo, with thin legs and a retro mirror encircled with lights. Her art choices match the same pattern. It had to be deliberate. A framed Turner print hung next to a cubist abstract by an artist I didn't recognise. A classical sculpture stood next to a kitsch bust of Elvis Presley. This juxtapositioning is encapsulated by most of her work. It's a lot different to the charcoal sketch on his desk. These works are mostly in colour. Though there's variety, her major theme seems to be classical pieces being reinvented on the canvas in front of you. A stately home breaking down into abstract cubist shapes. A vast landscape dissolving into pointillism. If nothing else, it showcased her versatility. I don't think it's all good. The best pieces are the interiors. The way it transitions from one style to another in some of the work is a little gimmicky, as if someone had played with a filter on Photoshop. The interiors make more sense. It's more organic, like pulling out the influences of art that we see all around us, but never notice. I know he's here, somewhere. I'm so distracted by all the things around me, he still manages to make me jump. He's dressed in tatty clothes and is covered in dust and cobwebs. "How's everything going?" he says, as if nothing weird is going on. Baffled by everything, I answer, "I really don't know. Are you okay?" "Oh, I'm fine. I'm just fine. Just doing some tidying up." "Tidying?" "Well, okay, making a mess first. I haven't been through this stuff in years. About time, really. Out with the old and in with the..." He stops and looks uncomfortable. He picks up again. "Well, what's the good of it all being down here? Just because she's dead doesn't mean she has to be gone, right?" "Right." I nod like a bobblehead. "She was so alive, you know. And to move on, I have to be able to have her around, not just bury her. She's buried, of course. Cremated, actually. But I have to let the parts of her that are here live, right?" I nod like my life depends on it. "Have you seen her paintings?" "Yes." "They're so good, aren't they?" More nodding. "If her work survives, then, in a way, she survives, doesn't she?" "Of course. I get that." He picks up a framed canvas. It has the arches of the Roman Colosseum recurring into infinity like an M.C. Escher print. He blows off the dust and I step back to avoid it. I can't believe I never thought of this before. I don't know if I'll be able to recreate her look with my bits and bobs and what's still down here. But let's see. It would be good to have more colour in the hotel. I wasn't listening. I'd noticed the bathroom. The room was an ensuite like all the others in the hotel. But the door was nailed shut. Wooden planks of different lengths and thicknesses were arranged haphazardly over it, as if struck in place in a frenzy. "You seem stressed," he says. "Is everything all right? How was our delightful guest at breakfast?" I'd almost prefer talking about the dead. I feel my back tense up again. I start speaking with a frog in my throat. With my hands tucked behind my back, I blather on about what happened and how sorry I am and how I shouldn't have let my temper get the better of me. I won't let it happen again. I've just been stressed out with my studying and my class. I know we can't afford to put off guests, especially the militant reviewing crowd, and I'm really sorry for being so unprofessional. While I do it, I hate myself for doing it. Being so guilty and full of shame for something so stupid and irrelevant. I want so badly for him to forgive me. but perhaps even more, to get the telling off I feel I deserve. But he doesn't care. I'm here all worked up and sweating, and he doesn't care. At all. He brushes it off. Why is he so nice? He says she was a stupid cow, and that I shouldn't worry about it. With nothing else to say, no grovelling to do, I ask if he needs any help. Even though I can't think of anything worse, I just want to run away. He says he can handle everything. I should focus on my studies, and to try not to let them stress me out. I'll get there, apparently. Apparently everything will just fall magically into place. I head back upstairs, my mind racing, more sweat on my brow. I suppose not getting bollocked for driving a guest away is a good thing. But I can't let it go. I still feel like I failed. Everything in my world right now feels like a failure. Everything is going wrong and packing up. Well, better not screw this up. I need to call his brother. I don't want to. I don't want to get involved. Really, I don't. It has to be done. He probably won't thank me and it might ruin our relationship, but it is the right thing to do. Unless it's not. What if he's taking a positive step forward? Finally facing his past and trying to find a way ahead? It could be that. So should I interfere? What if, by calling his brother, he gets defensive, or his brother gets the wrong idea and they end up fighting? Maybe I should give him more time. But there was the gas this morning. That was probably an accident. Not a serious attempt at suicide. And down in that basement is a door. It's nailed shut with wooden planks. That's where it happened. And he's never been able to face it. It could be getting worse. I need to be responsible and raise the alarm. I don't need more people dying on me, with disappointment written all over their faces. Where's my phone? I left it in the kitchen for some reason. But I don't have a signal, because the signal in the hotel is shit. I look outside at the grey, miserable weather. You can sometimes get a signal in the garden, but it's pouring it down. No, I've decided. No turning back and hesitating. I put on my boots and my rain mac and I face the rain. It's terrible. I have to keep wiping water off my screen so I can see what I'm doing. The signal bars stay stubbornly low. I walk all the way to the bottom of the garden. I hold my phone up in the air. I wipe more water off it. I can't just text him. This stuff is too big for a text. I'll have to try and call him. But the phone won't connect. I find myself climbing up the rockery. I've got 2 bars. 2 bars. Why isn't that enough? I hit the call button and nothing happens. I try again and again. With the phone against my ear, I catch sight of something in the greenhouse. Is that a figure behind the glass? It looks scrawny and grey. It's hard to see under the rainwater. But is it looking at me? Grinning at me? The surprise makes me gasp and I lose my footing. I slip down the rockery, my legs scrape against the rocks and my phone slips from my fingers. I roll onto my side on the grass. I scream up into the sky. Both my right leg and one of my palms have been bruised and scraped. My right knee thumped against one of the stones and it's really painful. As I try to sit up, he appears. He reaches down to help me to my feet. I don't know what's happened to my phone. He finds it in a puddle. The screen is cracked. It's no good to me now. He helps me back inside, telling me if we let it dry out, it will probably be okay. Like hell it will. My leg hurts so bad. He helps me to get my boots off. He heads to the kitchen to fetch some frozen peas and I limp into the living room. There's a canvas in there. It's a portrait of his wife and the eyes have been slashed through with a knife. I nearly scream and lose my balance. It's like the charcoal one in his office, but this one looks straight at you. It used to. I feel so dizzy. I let myself drop into an armchair. I hear the peas drop in the kitchen, tiny frozen balls roll across the floor. He dashes in and cries, "Oh God, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to startle you." The painting is leaning on top of a dining chair. It was damaged some time ago, tragically. It's the only full-size portrait she ever made. He picks it up and turns it to face away from us. I thought I might be able to repair it. He asks me how I'm feeling. "How do you think I'm—" I stop myself from shouting. He crouches down in front of me. "I'm not worried about me," I say to him, close to tears. "I'm worried about you." "About me?" he says, gormlessly. "Yes, of course you. You're suddenly going through your wife's things and talking about her art and bringing her back. I do know, you know, about all the things you've been through. And it's none of my business, I know. But if you're having some kind of episode, I need to know because, well, what will happen to the hotel?" "Oh, that's not important." "Not important? It's the winter, no one's staying here." "Well, yes, but—" "You don't have to worry about me. I'm all right." He almost attempts a hug, but thinks better of it and places a hand on my knee before taking that back too. It's been years since Lissa died. It's ridiculous I've waited so long to sort out her things. They're just down there collecting dust. They could be doing some good, somewhere. What I've realised is that Lissa will always be a part of my life. Moving on doesn't mean that I'm leaving her behind. She's left me with so many great ways to remember her and celebrate the life she had. That's all I want to do now. I think it's a good step for me. Another step out into the real world again. I feel a tear fall down my cheek. He notices and without hesitating reaches for a handkerchief in his pocket and wipes it away. For just a second he stares into my eyes, and there's some intensity there. He springs to his feet suddenly and spins around, turning his back to me. He takes a step forward, but there's nowhere to go. There's only a wall in front of him. He looks like he's going to turn his head to talk to me, but he can't. I want to say, "It's okay," or something to that effect. It won't make things any less awkward, but it will fill the silence at least. He finally turns a little. "I suppose we better try to dry out this phone." He makes a move towards the kitchen for it. "Maybe I should put it in the microwave." I say, "Maybe just put it by the radiator. I don't think it'll really help much." I try to stand up and seeing me struggle, he sweeps back quickly. "It's okay," I say, taking my steps gingerly. "Not as bad as I first thought. I just need to rest it up. I'm going to lie down." "Would you like me to bring you a drink or some food?" "No," I say bluntly. "I'll look after myself, thanks. The only thing I want now is some room to breathe." I'm so relieved when my bedroom door closes behind me. This is all too much. My aching body, my aching head. When he explained it just then, it seemed more positive, less unhinged. But what do I know? I'm not a psychologist. That insane fucking painting. And that moment, when he looked into my eyes. I don't want to think about that. I can't deal with that now. I watched the rain strike the window. What the hell did I see in that greenhouse? Must have been a reflection of something. I hopped to the window. There's nothing there now, at least that I can see. Am I that messed up and out of my mind that I'm seeing things? Too many questions and no answers. Too many crises and no solutions. I lie down in my bed and actually doze off for maybe 10 to 15 minutes. I didn't expect to, but I was just too exhausted. Then something drifts in from the depths of my memory and I sit bolt upright. What was it his brother said? You never know, he play acts the way you think you'd expect him to. I go to my desk and open up my laptop. I can send his brother an email. Better safe than sorry. But it won't send. The Wi-Fi is down. I can hear him in the kitchen. I poke my head around the door and shout to him. Yeah, it's been down for a few hours actually, must be the storm. I close my door. I feel my heart racing again. My head is pounding worse than ever before. I feel faint. I need to get out of here and get help. But I'm in no fit state to go anywhere. I lock the door and lie down on the bed. Maybe if I can just get some sleep. Just a little. Then I'll get in my car and I'll fetch some help. Everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to be fine. I'm going to go, and I'm going to get help soon.
You know, one of the things I've learnt about the dead is they don't really have much to say about the present. Go up to a ghoul and say, "How are you doing, me old mucker?" And they really don't have anything to say to you. They can't really comprehend that they're dead. They know it as a fact, but it's like when you tick the box on the terms and conditions. They've accepted the terms, but you don't really know what they are or how they affect you. It's just done, and then you carry on. It's all about the past with them. Normally they can't tell you what they've been doing the last few weeks, months, years, but ask them about what they were up to when they still clung to the mortal coil, and they'll spill their guts out for hours on end. I shouldn't be disappointed. How many sort of living people can claim to have actually spoken to ghosts? Not many honest ones. Hardly any, probably. I just can't speak to the ghost that I want to speak to. Perhaps she doesn't want to speak to me. Maybe everything I feared is true, that I failed her utterly, and I don't have her forgiveness. Perhaps because I let her go, she'll never come back, and that's my punishment. I wasn't there for her. While she suffered, I was still playing games. I talked myself into thinking the distractions were good for her, that I was helping to keep her spirits high with my little stories and games and diversions. But they were really just for me, to keep me safe from thinking about the inevitable. It's always the same with me. I've always hidden from the world in my imagination, where I can do what I want and can't be harmed by anyone or anything, where I'm safe from the disappointments of trying and failing. I wonder what made me that way. Maybe my mum dropped me on my head when I was a baby. Maybe some other trauma made me always retreat to a place where I can't be hurt. Making things up has always been easier than living. I'm just like the ghosts. When Lissa died, she took my future with her. I didn't understand until she was gone that everything in my life was tied up with her. I always did things because she wanted to do them. She had ideas and ambitions, and I strove to help her with those things rather than have any ambition of my own. Not because they were the things I wanted. I just wanted them for her. Even a family I wanted because she wanted it. Can't picture one without her. Without her, my life really does have no meaning. I never found one for myself. She always used to look after me. I failed to look after her. I don't really believe in fate. Whatever happens, happens. Sometimes things appear to line up. Usually everything's just random. My hope is crushed. I dared let myself believe I might finally get to talk to her and beg for her forgiveness. That hope has gone now. It's time to give up that fantasy. No ifs or buts. A good thing has come from my conferences with ghosts. What I have now is a chance to not repeat my mistakes. I have a new purpose, and it's a good one. I can do something good and save the life of someone else I care about. There's a malign, and dangerous presence in my home, a monster that feeds on the pain and hurt of others. I've learnt plenty so far about its trail of destruction, its murder of 8 innocent people. I have a chance to vanquish an ancient evil. What fantasist, what storyteller could ask for more? I have a chance to save Joey, one of the nicest, sweetest, kindest people alive. There'll be no running away, no distractions, no flights of fancy. I am going to go out with a bang. The author was almost too easy. The cruel man gained his senses back rapidly upon his arrival. He slid so quickly from his slumber, started to gather his strength, and stalk his prey. This man curiously understood what the cruel man was. He knew that he was being haunted by a ghost. That lack of fear made it harder for the cruel man at first. It kept him subdued. It wasn't until the arrival of a woman, less comfortable with the idea of a wandering spirit, that he had more to work with. The author was anxious of his new company. He wished to impress her, and he was curious about the cruel man. He wanted to discover what his ghost's nature was. That made it easier to play with them both. He preserved his strength. He made the odd tap here and there, moved an object or two, placed a footstep, and with each move they became more and more afraid. But he got impatient. His greed got the better of him, his insatiable hunger, his taste for the theatrical. He had to escalate his attack. The author tried to film him on what he supposed was a camera. They looked so different now. He struck each one down, driving the man into a state of terror. He tried to hide, but the cruel man unleashed his pent-up strength, forcing the rhythm into his ears, into his mind. Had he played his hand too quickly? The author still had enough strength to flee. The cruel man was frustrated. He expected him to return, but when? He was hungry. He did not want to wait. The cruel man had never left the house before. The inner walls were mapped to his memory, whether he could see them or not. When he stepped beyond the 4 walls, he saw the rest of the world as a fog. It was almost invisible to him. The only world he could fully comprehend was in the house. He assumed he had some link to it, perhaps within the walls, or perhaps he was tied to those useless bones, buried somewhere beneath the downstairs kitchen. But as he stared into the outside world, he could sense something. He could hear his quarry, sense the rhythm he had planted inside him. He could concentrate and clear his mind, hear through the chaotic out-of-focus world, and just hear the knocking rhythm he had planted deep within the author's mind. He felt he could pull on it, like a fisherman reeling in a line. He was not so far away. When the author fell asleep, he was weak enough that the cruel man could still reach into him, bend him to his will, force him to return. Though he needed to satisfy his hunger, he knew he must prepare for his next prey. No more falling into dreams. He was done with waiting, hiding, being less than he could be. He knew the woman would make chase and come to save the author, so he delayed his moment of triumph so she could witness the horror of his expiring. She ran up the stairs to save him. He struck her down. He loved to see them tumble. Then he allowed her to watch as he embraced the author and ended him slowly. He did not allow himself too much time to enjoy the kill. He quickly started to whisper the rhythm into her ears before the ambulance men arrived and took her away. He would need a little time to recover his strength, feel fully energized from the feeding, but there would be no more waiting for his prey to come and visit in the house. It was time to hunt in the wild. Once he was ready, he stood on the threshold. He turned his ear to the wind. Channeling out all else, he could hear the rhythm that she carried inside her. His grip was not strong yet, but he did have his hold. That was enough to guide him. It was the light in the fog. It was time to start the chase.
I feel like I'm being pummeled in the head. I wake up in a fever, sticky, sweaty, stiff-jointed. How long have I been asleep? What time is it? It's pitch black outside. The only clock I have is my phone and it's in pieces somewhere. I neck some more ibuprofen in the bathroom. I know it won't be enough. This is a raging, once-in-a-lifetime headache. Like nothing I've had before. It's like a beat. Like someone knocking on the inside of my temple. What's wrong with me? Even my heartbeat seems off. It's weird. It's weird I'm even noticing that. Is this what the stress is doing to me? The world is spinning. I flip open my laptop. It's almost 10 at night. I'd only meant to lie down for an hour, maybe 2, yet now I feel worse. There's still no Wi-Fi. This could be psychosomatic. I could be giving myself a fever. Why was I doing this to myself? Why am I so feeble, so masochistic? I find I'm tapping the table anxiously. I stop myself. Thunder rumbles and rain strikes the window. I suddenly feel how cold it is. Or is that the fever too? Has he turned the boiler off? I dread to think what he might be up to. It's freezing. And just as I think of him, I hear sounds from upstairs. Loud footsteps. I look up at the ceiling. Perhaps he's just cleaning out that annoying woman's room. It's late, but that could be it. Except the noise carries on. There are footsteps. They're moving from one room to another, quickly, like he's dashing about. It has to be more than one person. We couldn't have guests. Surely I'd have heard if there was a walk-in. I'm supposed to be running things, aren't I? The footsteps sound even louder in reception. There's a landline in his office. I can still call his brother if things get desperate, if his number is written down somewhere. Slowly, I walk up the stairs. I reach the mid-landing, and I hear someone run across the hall. "Who's there?" I shout suddenly. There's no answer. The hall light comes on. It's motion sensitive. Why wasn't it on already? All the doors are open, and his wife's pictures are everywhere. They're propped up against walls. A few have been hung where other pictures were hung before. It's the same in the bedrooms. Sketches are taped to the wallpaper. Canvases are sat in the chairs, some lie on the beds. The canvas with the eyes gouged out was propped up at the end of the hall. As I approach it, I hear footsteps behind me. I turn around, but it's too late, they're gone. They crossed from right side to left, I'm sure of it. I run into each room on the left. I search them all, but I can't find anyone. It happens again, left to right now, running behind me when they know I'm not looking. They go into room 6. It was definitely 6. The last on the row. I run to check. I make a shrieking sound. "Shh," he says. He's suddenly by the stairs. He has his finger on his lips. I put both hands over my mouth. He walks towards me. "Careful, you'll scare them off." "I found them," he says, beaming. "After all this time, I found the ghosts." He stands close, whispering. What I needed, what I didn't have before, was a fresh one. A newly bumped off. It was an entry point. Once I made contact with her, it began a whole chain. I could link from her back to the next, and the next. Now I have a whole team. ghosts stretching back through the generations. We're going to have a séance, he smiles, holding out his hands. All of us together, we're going to summon her. Together, we can bring Lissa back. I catch his hands with mine. Stop this, I cry. It's hard to speak. I stare into his eyes. You have to stop this. You can't speak to the dead. You know you can't. This is crazy. You need help. Let me help you, Peter. Let me help you. He stares back at me. He is still smiling. There's a sound above us. We both look up. Are you sure? He says. There are more footsteps. More and more of them. They move fast from room to room. The lampshades are shaking. Suddenly he's holding my hands. He grasps them tightly. Join with us, he whispers. We can cross over together. I tear my hands from his and push him out the way. He falls into a doorway as I dash down the stairs. The exertion causes the thumping in my head to grow even stronger. I think I'm going to fall those last steps, but I make it, only to collapse against the reception desk. My heart's beating wildly. I slam the office door shut and reach for the phone, but there's no dial tone. He's cut the phone line too. My whole world is spinning. My brain might explode. I've got to find help. For my safety, my health, and his. I've got to find help. I go for my car keys. I have to risk it. I slip on the first shoes I find and I struggle for the door. I get vertigo just climbing down the steps from the porch to the car park. Something is happening to me. My heart is literally skipping beats. My body is telling me something is wrong. It's like there's a pulse, thumping from my chest throughout my body. I can feel it from my temple to my toenails. I think it may knock me off my feet. I can't walk straight. I manage to get to my car. It takes me so much effort just to find the lock with the key. Sitting down helps. I find the ignition more easily. With my teeth gritted, I put it into reverse, then slowly forward, down the slope. I get a sinking feeling in my stomach. I feel like I'm falling. The beat in my brain is so hard my vision starts to turn red. I'm almost paralyzed. I roll out of the drive, get a few feet down the road and drive straight into a ditch. My car nosedives in. My head hits the steering wheel. The airbag hits my face and breaks my nose. The car doesn't turn over. It balances on the bumper and then tilts back. The underside groans as it leans on the tarmac. It rests nearly vertical. I sit for a moment, the beat still pulsing in my brain, in my bones, but just a little less intense. I hear the window wipers thump back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. I reach out with my right arm and find the door handle. I click it open. Slowly I try to work my upper body out from behind the airbag. I grab the door frame and pull myself out. I spit blood and flop down into a ditch, landing on my back in the muddy water. It's cold, but I hardly notice. I think the pains in my head and in my chest may break me in half. My head may snap off my shoulders, like someone breaking off a piece of celery. I don't want to move. I want whatever is going on inside me to calm down. I'm so scared. I think I might be dying. I just lie with the beat pulsing and my body aching and the cold water running over me. I just hope that it might stop, might slow down, might just get a little less painful. I see someone standing above me, on the road. I can hardly make out the figure. It's not him. This person is small with long hair. She's waving to me. I hold up my arm, hoping she might reach down, trying to help me up. But she just stands there. She keeps gesturing to me, as if I don't know which way out of the damn ditch I need to go. I can hear her voice. It's so hard to make out over the wind and the rain and the windscreen wipers. I roll onto my side and grab onto wet grass. I grab it in handfuls and pull my chest out of the mud. I push my feet into the soil and push up and grab, and slowly I put my palms on the road and crawl up onto it, lying there on my front. As I get to my hands and knees, I finally see her clearly. Somehow, it's Claire Parker, and I know I've gone mad. She takes a step towards me. She's about to bend down. Then there's this flash. A grey blur sweeps past and she vanishes. There's a scream cut off in a moment. She's gone. I shakily pick myself up onto my feet. Dizziness almost brings me back down again. I stagger back to the hotel. I've got nowhere else to go. I walk like a paralytic drunk up to the driveway, bent forward, staggering, wavering from side to side, falling to my knees, getting back up again. The pulse returns in strength. It wants me to fall. It wants to bring me down for good. By the time I get through the door, I'm down to a crawl. I'm out of places to go. I want to get to my room. It's the only safe place I can think of. I can't look up from the floor because the spinning world hurts my eyes. It intensifies the pain. I crawl through the door, but standing up, clicking the lock, that's too hard. I can't. I don't have the strength. I'm dying. I must be. How? Why? I don't know what's happening to me. With my last ounces of strength, I climb onto the bed. I grab and I hug my duvet. Tears stream down my cheeks. What a waste. This is it. My time is over. What a stupid waste. It's my last moments on earth and all I could think of is, what a disappointment I am. It's my last living moments, and all I can comprehend is all the disappointing looks, from my mother to my supervisor, from H to dead Claire Parker, looking up at me or down at me. I've done nothing with my life. Not a goddamn thing. I feel a presence in the room. Rolling onto my back, I see faint shadows, figures surrounding me. They watch as he rises up. The horrible stick-like man. His arms are like the branches of a tree. He holds them out to his sides like an actor bringing in his applause. His face is one long, terrifying grin. He stands on the mattress and raises one arm over me. As he moves his bony fingers, I feel my heart stop, then start again, like he's pulling on the strings and making it play. My body shakes and starts to panic. His smile opens up, saliva drips from his razor teeth and lands on my neck. I can't scream. I'm powerless. I'm going to be killed by a nightmare. I'll never wake up again.
Poor Claire Parker. She'd outlasted all the others. When she arrived home from hospital and heard the knocking, she knew what was coming. The cruel man even changed his knocking, added one extra to mark his 7th victim, a little joke to make sure she knew she was next. She knew she couldn't stay at home. Her flatmate was a performer. She'd been on tour, but had returned to take care of her. Claire was terrified she would become a target once he finished with her. She didn't want to risk it. Claire did what she had to convince her friends she was okay and could resume touring. Her lies were just about convincing enough for her to leave. But what would Claire Parker do now? The cruel man had followed her home. Craig had come to hers that night, perhaps led him all the way there. Would he now follow her if she left? How far and for how long could he follow her? She couldn't go to her parents or any of her friends, so she booked an Airbnb, a studio that was self-contained, in a town she'd visited once for a holiday. She packed a bag and left as soon as she was able. Already he was making his noise, moving things around. She kept seeing things out the corner of her eye. He could be anywhere, watching her, getting ready for her. Her hopes were in vain. A few days after arriving in her rented home, the knock came triumphantly back, just as she was about to get into bed. And then she was too afraid to sleep. She knew that the more she fell into despair, the more she fell into his grasp. She left the flat before dawn broke to seek a new place to stay. She stayed in a B&B for a few nights before moving on to another Airbnb. If she moved quickly, never staying in the same place twice, would he lose her, forget about her? But when she was tired, when she was distracted, when she dared dream of a future where she would survive and carry on, she would see her hand tapping on her lap or feel her foot tapping on the ground. His rhythm was inside her. All she had to do was let her guard down for a second, and she could feel his presence. She was running out of time. She was running out of money. He would never leave her alone. She had to do something. She was giving up hope. Slowly a plan came to her. She found a home and an occupied house for sale. She broke in and set up a room for herself. She lived discreetly in the house for a day or two, waiting for him to come. She laid her sleeping bag down in the bedroom. She allowed herself only the first night to sleep. Each night after, she stayed awake. She lay with a strip of barbed wire at each side so that she would wake if she rolled to her sides or her arms dropped from her chest. She placed a heavy stone on her left side and half a brick on her right. She used incense and weed to try to stay calm, even though they made her sleepy too. He did not come on the second night, which made it so much harder on the third. She kept slipping away and then snapping awake before she could be stung by the wire. He barely made a sound when he entered the house, but she could sense that he was near. She felt his rhythm stir inside her. She kept her eyes closed, listening for footsteps. They were so light, they were almost silent. When she smelled his rancid breath against her cheek, when she felt the beat in her mind and her heart spread throughout her body, determinedly, she stayed calm, she stayed still. She had seen him touch and molest her friend. He had struck her down a flight of stairs. If he could become solid, then surely he could be hurt too. She reached for the brick and smashed it against his head. The monster let out a warped shriek. He crumbled like a pile of sticks by the bed. She had saved a piece of copper pipe to deliver a fatal beating, but he still had the strength to activate the rhythm that beat inside her. As she was ready to strike him, she felt an incredible clasping pain in her chest. Her heart seemed to stop. She gasped for breath. It started to beat again, but he wrenched back control a moment later. Her body was fighting against him, and she was losing. She lost her balance. She felt her strength drain away. She was too far gone. She stumbled out of the room and escaped to the back door. Her suitcase was there waiting. Wherever she went, it was always packed and ready for her. It took hours for her head to clear, for the beat and the pain to die down. She was almost spent. She had only so much fight left in her. Where could she go where it would not hunt her down? She'd proven it could be hurt, but she had failed to kill it. Now it would be on its guard. Would she get a second chance? It would never give up. She could still hear the knocking sound. He would be back for revenge. She had no doubt about it. But what could she do? Despite her exhaustion her fatigue, her resignation, had she any choice but to try again? She slept a little on a bench, found her way to a store that sold knives. She thought about using them on herself, but decided against it. She would go out fighting. She walked miles into the country. She thought she might make her last stand out in the open, smelling the trees and grass and the fresh air one last time. But she might not hear him come, and it was certain to rain. So she walked a few miles more. Using her phone, she found her way to my hotel. She had no idea if her credit card would work. She had no idea if she had any money left. I showed her to her room, where she allowed herself a few hours to sleep. She could barely stop herself. She'd put much less distance between herself and him this time. Despite the many miles she'd walked, he'd catch up with her so much quicker. She had to keep awake. She used the last of her incense and weed to calm her, though it had little effect. She kept on waiting. But he did not come thundering straight to her for revenge. He took his time. She was crippling herself with exhaustion. She should have known he'd seek to prolong it, make her suffer more. He arrived, and he waited, and he watched. She slipped slowly into a delirium. She was too helpless to take any action by the time she felt his rhythm grow and slowly take her over completely. She had no strength left to scream. As her heart gave way, she slipped from the bed and collapsed to the floor, dying with barely a whimper. His most spirited prey died so quietly in the end. Claire Parker can understand her situation more than the others. She doesn't just know that she's dead, she can, to some extent, understand what it means and describe what it's like to be in the dark, to be there but not there, to have a kind of existence that was like being a shadow, sometimes growing, sometimes fading, sometimes hardly real at all. Why is she different to the others? She's more recently dead, but why should that make her unique? Did the mental faculties of ghosts fade over time, like a sort of aging? Were you at your most enlightened soon after dying? Why was I able to speak to any of them at all? Together we formed a kind of hypothesis. We think that the cruel man, as he has grown stronger and more deadly, that some of his power has somehow been absorbed by his victims, and just as he has risen, become more and more alive, they too have begun to return from the dead. Claire Parker didn't know what she was at first, and didn't remember where she was. It would have been distressing if she had the faculties capable of creating distress. Without her body, those natural instincts were dulled. They'd faded too. She didn't lie in darkness for long after dying, and it was all because of her friend, the writer who had died before her, his familiar voice, his compassion for her. He blamed himself for her death. His sorrow called to her and brought her out of the shadows. Whether this hypothesis is true or not, who am I to say? It all sounds bonkers, especially from a bonkers type like me. There are so many questions, so many things it's hard for the rational brain to make sense of. I just have to make the best sense of it that I can. This thing we do know. The cruel man must be stopped. It was obvious he intended to make Joey his next target. Finding Claire's body, failing to save her, had unmoored her, left her vulnerable. There were other issues with her personal and professional life I didn't want to probe too closely, but she'd been greatly upset by someone, and they'd been arguing very late into the evening. It wasn't enough for him to make his move, not yet. She hadn't reached a significant enough level of distress, and that left us with an uncomfortable choice. We could either wait for her condition to get worse, to stand back and watch while he found ways to upset her and terrify her further, or we could take the situation in hand. After expending so much energy on hunting down Claire, the monster would enjoy an easy meal, if laid out for him. Considering my, let's say, eccentric persona, and the worries I had already stirred up in Joey, it wouldn't be much of a stretch to convince her that I had taken a one-way all-access VIP ticket to Crazyville. She's a caring creature. Watching me go up the wall and across the ceiling, I knew she'd be distressed at the thought of me hurting myself. The cruel man was unlikely to see me as a threat, probably more like an asset. I'd do the work for him, wind Joey up and leave her ready for him to take his fill. Claire Parker was right. He could be hurt, and if he could be hurt, he could presumably be killed too. Once he appeared, in the flesh, I would be waiting for him. This is not a plan I like. I do not want to place Joey in a trap, leave her there as bait. But she wouldn't believe me if I told her what was going on. Why would she? And she'll die if I do nothing. Others will die too. I took no pleasure in the games I played on her, leaving on the gas, ranting about Lissa's things, breaking her phone the first chance I got. The performance upstairs. I hated doing that to her. I'm so thankful to have had her in my life. She's one of the few bright spots in my post-Lissa world. I hope she'll be able to forgive me for what I've done. It's not just to save her. It's to put an end to this evil, and to finally give his victims a chance to rest. I get to play hero after all. I crouch behind the counter in reception. I hear Joey tumble through the door and watch as she crawls across the floor. Tears flow down my face, but I can do nothing to help her, not yet. I move to the end of the desk. I watch, I see, walking slowly across the hall, the outline of a man. His image fades in as he approaches the door to her room. The lines of his sinewy, gristly body colour with a sickly pale shade. This figure is all wrong. It looks more like a praying mantis than a man. The sounds Joey makes are awful, more so as they get quieter. She doesn't have much time left. It's now or never. I have the ends of a cable wrapped around my wrists. I creep to the doorway, hide where he can't see me. I step inside, noose in my hands, take a few quiet steps towards him. I take a leap onto the bed and drop it over his head. And before he knows what's happened, I bounce back off, land on the floor and yank the cord. The noose tightens and the sound he makes could split the atom. I don't stop. I can't. He hits the floor and I turn, throwing the cable over my shoulder and making a charge into the hall. His long limbs flail around as I pull him across the carpet. I can't let him gain a foothold. I turn so I can pull with extra force to stop him getting a grip on the bedroom door frame. Then it's back over the shoulder, one step in front of the other, pulling him along as hard as I can. Down to the basement we must go. I get to the bottom of the stairs as it rolls into the doorway. Facing it with both hands, I pull it through the door. It's not struggling now. Have I broken its neck? I reel it down. It thumps on each step and lands in a heap at the bottom. He seems to be dead, but I can't take that chance. I drag him to the middle of the room, pull him close to the pyre made of Lissa's belongings. Before I dare lift him on top, I grab a heavy silver candlestick. I stand over him, ready to bash his brains in. I take a chance, and I touch his sticky, cold flesh. It doesn't stir. He does not move, so with the candlestick close by, I lift him from under the shoulders, then turn and roll him onto the pyre. I breathe in the sweet stench of petrol. I run up the stairs to the door, taking my eyes off him for never more than a second, and I pull the door to. The matches are ready, on top of the dryer. I strike one and survey the scene. I take a deep breath. I flick the match. The rush of air when it catches fire, it forces me to step back. The shriek is like an explosion between my ears. I reach again for the candlestick, ready to prevent any attempt to escape. The last I see of it before the room fills with smoke is its limbs twisting and struggling. I stop listening to its noise. I'm coughing. I can't breathe. I don't know when it stops. I'm starting to bend double. I let the candlestick go. I don't give in to the survival instinct to run for safety. This is the end of my game. My final move. I hope to God Joey can escape. That he hasn't hurt her too badly. We have fire doors. We have an alarm loud enough to wake the dead. She must get out before it's too late. My time has come. Whatever Lissa may think of me and how I failed her, she can't deny that in this thing, this crazy thing, I have succeeded. I didn't run or hide. I finally did something to make her proud of me. She has to forgive me now. She must. Is that her? I see a figure in the smoke. I'm on my hands and knees. Cannot breathe and my lungs are giving in. She knows my time is near. She bends down to pick me up. I use my last strength to throw myself into her arms. She has forgiven me. We're together again. Oh, my love, where have you been? Can't tell you how much I've missed you.
Stupid idiot. I try to pick him up, but he grabs onto me and almost pulls me down with him. I can barely see a thing. I can hardly see where I've come from to find my way back. I can barely keep myself up. He's not walking. He's holding on to me for dear life. His head is buried into my shoulder, but he's not moving his legs. My body is so weak. The smoke is overwhelming. I can hear things snapping and breaking in the fire. I'm desperately trying to hold my breath. I can't carry him up the stairs. I drag him on his back. Even when we get onto the landing, there's still too much smoke. I can't get any air. I leave him just for a moment so I can throw open the doors to the hotel. The sudden intake of air brings me to my knees. I'm a wreck. I don't have the strength for this. But I crawl back, get up to my feet again and drag him out of the door and unkindly down the steps until we're outside, in the car park. I fall down. I lie next to him, both of us on our backs. I'm so out of it. I forget to check if he's still breathing. Suddenly he breathes in and starts to cough, and I feel relief wash over me. I see the flames break free from the basement windows. Smoke is billowing up to the sky through the front door. If I'm going to go back to save my research, I have to go now. I have to go and do it now. But I'm not going to. I can't. I don't have it in me. That's going to go up too. It's all going to go up. Who's going to call the fire brigade? I'm not sad. I'm not angry. I don't know what to do or what to think. I don't know what's happened. Something tried to kill me. I think he tried to stop it. Then he tried to die. Maybe he won't thank me for saving him. I don't care. I just lie back and watch as it all goes up in smoke.
The hotel is a mess. It did not quite burn to the ground. Those pesky fire safety precautions essentially did their job. If we had guests, they would have all survived. Nice for them. But having the place still standing has caused us all sorts of problems, and a lack of ways to pay for them. You can't claim off the insurance when it's pretty obvious you set the thing on fire yourself. Thankfully, my reputation for being unhinged has prevented any criminal charges, though I was barely able to keep myself out of the madhouse this time. Though the hotel still stands, the smoke destroyed most of my belongings. I lost almost everything, but I gained quite a lot too. I don't believe in fate or destiny. I'm not sure what I believe in now. I shouldn't be alive, but I think it would be churlish to deny that I am alive. After so many attempts to be dead, to live like the dead, but to not actually be dead, you have to take the hint eventually. I am a real, living and breathing human being. Goodbye, Mr. Ghostly. You are no more. I am a phoenix risen from the ashes. That's a good story. I can get behind that. A man reborn. A hero, but not quite a hero. A villain, but only in part. A has-been and a will-be again. I did think about changing my name for a time, but she said not to because it would be silly, so I didn't. There were no bones in the fire. That saved us some awkward questions. We think he must be dead. We've heard no more tapping. And there have been no more conversations with ghosts. Not everything was destroyed in the fire. Miraculously, the smoke didn't destroy Joey's research. Most of it was salvageable. And yet, she didn't seem too happy about it. The paintings I took upstairs survived too. I'm glad I didn't lose them all. She'd never have forgiven me. I've paid for someone to repair the eyes in the portrait. We will finally be able to look at each other, eye to eye again. No more bad dreams. And because they were sealed up in a suitcase, Claire Parker's belongings also survived. In time, they were reunited with her parents. I wish I could have said how brave she was, how we might not be alive today if it wasn't for her. But nothing I could have said would have made sense to them. More than likely, it would have added to their sorrow and confusion. Perhaps they'll hear this story one day. It's not much, but at least her things found their way home. And she gets to rest now. Feels good to be outside. I've taken to walking. There's nothing I love more than taking a long trek into the hills and deep into the woods, smelling the grass and the flowers, feeling the breeze on my face, listening to the birds in the trees. I just set off, head out without a map, and I never know where I'm going to and where I'll end up in the end. Every day is a new adventure.
I don't think I'll ever really know or understand what happened that night. I've asked him to explain it to me more than once, and I've never exactly had the same answer back. Although he was very upset that first time, very apologetic, so that might account for some of the discrepancies. It's difficult, all of this, for someone academically minded to accept. On principle, I don't really go in for the impossible, but I know that I was almost killed by something unspeakable. I believe it probably killed Claire Parker too. I'm not much sure about anything else. It would be easy to write off all that Peter said, if I hadn't seen some of it myself. I've never spoken about it before. If I were examining events from an outsider's perspective, I couldn't believe it. I'd have all kinds of hypotheses for what really happened. I'd thought long and hard about what many of them might be. But it just doesn't make sense, whichever way I try to piece it together. He's so much happier now. He's still a handful, still drives his brother crazy. But he doesn't do anything too crazy. Odd, yes, but not crazy. The irony of it all is that I came out looking like a hero. I saved a man's life. We were written about in some of the papers. I never talked to any journalists, and I avoided the attention. But it meant that when I returned to campus, people were talking about me for a completely different reason than I dreaded they might. You might think I'd enjoy it, the positive reaction, that I might feel relieved about it. But I didn't. I found that I hated people thinking anything about me at all. If it weren't for the fire, things could have been very different. I might have walked into the department with the words like slut and suspended without pay being thrown around. I was still the same person, regardless of this deed or that. It was just by chance that they thought of me one way instead of the other. I hated having to care about it. I hated that it mattered. It shouldn't matter. I will complete my dissertation, eventually. I still do bits and pieces of it, but it will be in my own time, and not anyone else's. It is what I want to do, but it's just not the only thing I might want to do. Mum isn't happy about my decision, but it's my decision and not hers. Life's too short to worry about this person or that, and it's too long to worry about what might have happened on any given day. There's time to work things out. Time to find a purpose that makes sense for me. No one else gets to say what that is except me. I am the kind of person who enjoys books and research and theories, but I'm also the kind of person who can save someone from a burning building. I may have potential that I've never explored. I won't ever find out if I only spend my time looking at books, or spend my time worrying about what other people might think of me. I may, in the end, find myself back amongst the books and manuscripts. And if that's where my journey ends, it will be wonderful. It will be a good thing, because it will be my choice. It doesn't matter where I end up. All that matters is that I get to choose the path and the pace, and that I get to know myself and what I really want on the way.
It's a funny sort of place, a hotel. It's like a rest stop for people as they move from one chapter to the next. Or perhaps more of an interval, a page between the chapters. Thank you for listening to Season 4 of the New Ghost Stories podcast. If you've enjoyed the podcast and would like to support what I do, please leave a review on any platform and make sure you subscribe to find out about future releases. The podcast is written, presented and produced by me, David Paul Nixon, and features a guest appearance by Karina Collier-Marsh as Joey. If you'd like to hear about new episodes, please subscribe to my free Substack, newghoststories.substack.com, and you can of course get updates from me on a variety of social media platforms if you search for @NewGhostStories. Thank you and goodbye.